Okay, good morning once again, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Perennial Legacy Advisory webinar. And today we have a very special sharing for you by Daniel. Now, he will share with you why wealth doesn't survive 3 generations. Now, Daniel has actually been in the financial services since 1997. Now, he specializes in legacy planning for individuals and also business succession for companies. Now, besides managing his team, there is also an entrepreneur, angel investor in private equity. And in 2012, he started a travel company specializing in cycling tours and was awarded the best tour experience in 2019 by the Singapore Tourism Board. He sold his share to his business partner in middle of 2019. So he is the founder and the chief speaker for Perennial Legacy Advisory Singapore, and he has been featured widely in the Straits Times, Business Times, Lianhe Zhao Bao, Channel 5, Channel News Asia, and many, many other platforms. Now, Daniel has also given back to society because he serves on the advisory board of his alma mater and has pledged over 90% of his wealth to his trust, which will then contribute to charitable causes. So, without further ado, I'd like to bring Daniel on. Daniel, please.
Hi, good morning. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for joining us this morning. I see some old friends. I see some people that I don't know, members of the public. I also understand from the registration that we have actually people from, I think, US or somewhere else around the world. So if it's good afternoon or good evening to you, there you go. This is a very small group sharing because obviously this topic is for selected people. You are here because you have perhaps reached a certain stage in your life where this is perhaps something that is on your mind. Your children are growing up. You know, I think that I hope to be able to share something very useful with you today. And along the way, if you have any questions, you can ask in the chat function. Because as in a webinar format, all the guests are muted. Okay, so we will try our best to answer questions towards the end of the session. All right, so I believe you're looking at my screen now. If there's any problems and so on, if you don't hear me or something, just feel free to type in the chat to let Kenneth or myself know. All right, so let's go on now. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Now before we start, as you know already, I am in the financial services sector, so we have a lot of compliance to follow. So please note that this presentation that I'm sharing today is for your general information, and it is not financial advice. All right. It depends on where you live. If you live in Singapore, then perhaps these laws apply to you. However, perhaps if you're one of our Muslim friends, then a different law may be applicable to you. Okay, so everything that I share today is from my personal experience, from talking to my clients, my years of interaction, and they do not represent the view of the authority or any of the principles that I represent. Okay, and this is also not a sales or product talk, but we're not trying to sell you any products. Okay, and I will be sharing many examples along the way. Most of them are real life, some of them are fictitious, all right, so there's no intention to resemble anybody. All right, so let's start. Okay, so very quickly, as most of you, not most of you, I think some of you know me, but some of you don't, so I do a very quick introduction. I, like many people in the late 80s, the computer revolution was coming up, so I went to take a diploma in electronics engineering. But I found that it wasn't really my cup of tea. So I decided to go into financial services in 1997. And I got my MBA last year from the UK. More importantly, for the purpose of this presentation, I have all these financial services accreditations that enable me to share, hopefully, some useful information with you. All right. So a little bit about our company, PLA, or Perennial Legacy Advisory. We are mainly a company that want to advocate financial knowledge through doing webinars like this. We were doing seminars actually face-to-face until the pandemic struck. So now you see us online. Okay, hopefully we can get back to doing seminars again, pardon me. Okay. Our talks are on business, innovation, entrepreneurship, etc., etc. And our tagline is to live a great life, leave a greater legacy. And it is our wish that perhaps with the information that we share today, you take home something that will enable you to do just that. Okay, and at PLA, we work with very important partners. You already met one of them, Mr. Kenneth D'Souza. All right, he is very kindly our MC today. So Kenneth is our resident wills and estate planner. He is very knowledgeable, and he will be coming in at the Q&A session later on, and from time to time to help me out. Okay, we also have Ms. Tan Lee, okay, who is also one of our partners. She has many years of experience in terms of protecting and preserving families' wealth. Okay, right. Now let's go into the content of what I'm going to cover today. Now we're going to talk about what is a trust, okay, and 5 common reasons why wealth doesn't survive 3 generations, or in Mandarin we call it 富不过三代. Right? Of course, there are many other reasons, but these are the 5 most common ones, and I'm sure you can identify with some of them. And after we learned what are the pitfalls, we try to look at the 3 pillars of an everlasting legacy. So if you want to have a long-lasting legacy, these are the 3 things that you should look out for. And as promised, at the end, we will do a Q&A. All right. So I'd like to call upon Kenneth to do our first will. I'd like to find out from our audience today if you have done your will. So Kenneth, over to you.
Okay, so I've launched the poll. Okay, so there should be a poll launch, and if you don't mind, you could please answer.
Yes, go ahead and answer. Yeah, your replies are anonymous. Yeah, good practice for our election coming up. Voting is compulsory. Please vote. Okay, yeah.
Okay, we'll stop the vote in about 20 seconds. Okay, as a repeat, your votes are anonymous, so don't worry. We won't go and call you and disturb you about it. Okay, so I'll end the poll now. Okay, so Daniel.
Yes.
The results are.
Yeah, I can see the results, Kenneth.
Yeah, you can see the results.
Share
right?
with the audience.
Yeah. Yes, this is the results I'm sharing.
Yeah, we have about some people have done about 1/3, or just over 1/3 have done their will, and about 2/3 have not done your will. All right, so thank you, Kenneth. Yeah, you can stop sharing the results.
Okay.
Okay, early on, our previous sessions, when we stopped sharing the results, my slides didn't come up. So could you just let me know if you are not looking at my slides, if there's any problem, right? So I'm going to go on. If you don't see my slides, please let me know. Okay, so let's recap. The title of our talk today is Wealth Doesn't Survive 3 Generations, or 富不过三代. So why do you think this is the case? All right. So people say the first generation creates, second generation preserves, and the third generation squanders. Okay? Now this happens usually because of only one reason. Okay, and that is either no plan or inappropriate plan. So I want to address again, for those of you who have done your will, I want to congratulate you. Okay, you have taken a very important first step. Okay, however, sometimes a will may not be sufficient, okay, which I'm going to cover on in the next slide. Okay, for those of you who have not done your will, then obviously you have no plan. I also hope that today we can encourage you to take some action to work on your plan. Okay. So those of you who have done your will. Say, okay, Daniel, I've done my will, so no problem, right? Okay. There are some limitations with wills, unfortunately. Okay, I have listed some on the screen. For example, a will, you can only do a one-time distribution. So for some of you who are still, how should I say, productive, okay, you may have children, or perhaps maybe thinking a little bit further, you may have multi-generation. And a will is also exposed to many risks and dangers. And some of my clients also tell me that, how about, values and ethics, because they feel that the younger generation today, they don't really understand meaning of suffering and hard work, unlike what our forefathers went through. Okay? So how can you do that all in your legacy planning? Okay, so in a will, it'll be very difficult to do that, but these problems can be overcome by using a trust, which is what I'm going to cover right after this. Okay, so some of you may have heard of a trust, some of you may have not. So those of you who have, please bear with me, take it as a revision. If you have not, then I will share something that is very useful for you. Okay, so this is a example of a trust. Okay, this is a take note. This is a very basic structure. All right, you can make it as complicated as you want, but this is essentially the basic structure of a trust. So we have a trust right in the middle. Now, there usually is put in by a couple. Let's call them the settlors. Okay, this is the proper term. Okay, so the settlors put in a trust to benefit their descendants, their beneficiaries. Okay, it can be not just individuals, but it can be organizations as well, which I'm going to share in the next slide. Okay, so instead of giving their assets directly to the beneficiaries, the assets are managed, put into the trust and managed by a professional trustee. Now, these trustees are companies that are licensed by MAS, like banks and insurance companies, just to manage trust. Right? They are subject to very stringent regulations. They're very subject to stringent audits because they are handling clients' money. Okay? So just like banks and insurance companies. Okay? So you can rest assured that at least in Singapore, I can't speak for other places, our trust companies are pretty solid. Okay, so essentially this is what a trust does. Okay, so in a trust, there's also the trustee and letter wishes. So these two documents will spell out what's in the trust, what is it supposed to be done. For example, if there is a property in the trust, for example, let's say a condominium apartment, should it be sold, should it be rented out, or should it be for the benefit of the beneficiaries to live in them? Okay, at what time should it be sold, and so on. Okay, so these will be all stipulated in the trustee and the letter of wishes. Okay, so along the way, I'm going to share again more examples, and then all these will become very clear to you. Okay, now I have actually done up my own little family trust. Okay, I am married. Currently, I have no children, not that I know of. Okay, and when I pass away, I don't have any descendants to give to, and I don't need to give to my nephew because he is a lawyer. I think he will be richer than me in no time. Okay, so for myself, animal welfare is very close to my heart. So actually, back in early 2000, I actually wrote a will to give everything to the animal welfare organizations in Singapore. Okay, but as I started to know more about trust, I realized that this is not a good idea, because let's take SPCA, for example. Suddenly SPCA gets a notice from a lawyer to say, hi, you guys are the owners of this condominium apartment right now. What do you think SPCA would do? They probably say, huh? What are we supposed to do with it? Sell it away, don't give us the money. Okay? So not being disrespectful, but they don't have the time to manage such things. Right? So when I found out more about trust, I decided to set it up. Okay, so I named my trust after my first dog, which is Weibo. Okay, so it's managed by a professional trust company, not by an individual. Very critical, because an individual has a limited lifespan. Okay, we have not discovered everlasting life yet, so we have to. It's better to have a company which has infinite life. Okay? So upon our demise, this is what will happen. The assets will go into the Weibo Trust, and the income will be managed every year and distributed to the animal welfare organizations in Singapore. So in this case, we can control the giving and it can last as long as possible instead of just selling everything and giving the cash to the animal welfare organizations. Right? Okay, so I was very proud and very humbled to be interviewed on the Straits Times with regards to this, because I think it's not something that people do often. So this was an interview that I did with Lorna in August last year. Okay, so let's now go to the 5 reasons why wealth doesn't survive 3 generations, right? So I'm sure you are dying to know, so let's launch right into it. Okay. Now, number 1, okay, you can see on your screen now, there are many photos of very nice things. I see a private jet, I see that looks like a Bugatti or some Bugatti Veyron or something, okay? So these pictures are from Instagram, okay? I think the hashtag is called Rich Kids of Instagram, where these children of very wealthy families, they take pictures of their flashy toys and they post it on Instagram to maybe show off. Okay? So all my fellow uncles and aunties here, if you don't have Instagram, after this, it's time to sign up. Okay? Hopefully you don't see your son or daughter showing off. Okay, just a joke. Huh? Okay, I'm sure your children are more thrifty. So what I'm trying to point out here is that the failure to protect against spendthrift descendants. Because if you have a will and you will the money to your children, okay, and someone who is, let's say, at 21, 22, gets $2 million, $3 million, what do you think they are going to do with it? Think back when you were 21. If you inherited $1 million, what do you think you will do with it? Okay. Don't tell me you were save and invest. Okay, I don't believe that. Okay. In fact, a trust company that we work with, they did a survey of their younger customers, or rather the young children of their clients who are in their age range, in their 20s, and asked them, hey, if you get $1 million, what would you do with it? I think you can guess. Okay, most of the guys will buy a sports car like the one you see on the screen, and most of the ladies will go to Orchard Road to spend. Okay? And one of the very good examples of this is actually Miss Paris Hilton. Okay, I think you are no stranger to her. She's all over the news. She's a very well-known socialite. She's also the heiress of the Hilton group of hotels and resorts. Okay, so very wealthy lady. She seems to have access to all the money in the world. And in Chinese, we actually have a phrase for these people, which we call 富二代, okay, which means a wealthy 2nd generation, which is, literally translated. Okay, so this is the first thing that you might want to take note of, because we can't control once we have given it lump sum to our children. And I'd like to share one example in the next slide. I am sure this lady is no stranger to all of you. Okay, to Kenneth, he knows her as Lydia Sam. Okay, to me, I don't know her as Lydia Sam. I know her as Shen Dianxia or Fei Fei. Okay, that shows the age difference between me and Kenneth. Okay, so we loved her in the Hong Kong shows. I think she was in Singapore for a period of time as well. Unfortunately, Lydia passed away in 2008. I'm sure you recall that. Now, when she passed away, she had one daughter, Joyce. Okay. At that time, in 2008, Joyce, you can see from the photo here, she was only 20 years old. Okay. Now, when she passed away, Lydia was worth $11 million, Singapore dollars. Mind you, Hong Kong is about 60 million. Now, that's a nice sum of money. Okay. Now, instead of giving the money directly to Joyce, which at that time, Joyce was only 20. Okay. What she did is that Lydia put everything into a trust fund, and the trust fund gives Joyce about 20,000 Hong Kong dollars, or about 3,006 Singapore dollars a month for her living expenses. Okay? It's not a lot, but it's enough to get by. Okay, I think 3,006 you can survive in Singapore or Hong Kong, no problem. Okay, so this is what she does, and I think that Lydia did a very wise thing, because Joyce admitted that at one point in her very young life, she had only $4.50 left in her bank account. Can you imagine if Lydia had given her all the 11 million? Chances are not much of it will be left. And there's no discredit to Joyce, right? It is perfectly normal behavior, okay? When a young person who is not financially mature comes into so much money. Okay, so you can see how wise Lydia is, how meticulous her planning is. She may play the crazy, zany character, silly sometimes even on screen. Right? I'm sure those of you who remember watching her, but in real life, wow, she has really good financial planning done. Okay, so Joyce is going to be 35 in 3 years' time. Okay, so in her trust also specifies that when Joyce is 35 years old, she can have the entire $11 million. Multi-billionaire in 3 years. So if you are a man, you are around her age group, and you are still single, girlfriend. Okay, don't say Daniel didn't tell you. Okay, now let's go on to number 2, fail to protect the vulnerable. Now, a lot of times when I speak to my clients, let's say I speak to the man, for example, and he says, no, Daniel, I don't need to do all these things. If I die, then everything just give to my wife. She can take care of everything. She's an accountant. She knows what to do. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, but let's see what happens if you do that. Okay. Unfortunately, this happened. Okay. Now, you see a picture of a couple, a very old photo. Now, the gentleman in the photo is Dr. Chow. Okay? Dr. Chow married his wife. Okay? His wife is called Madam Chung. Okay? So unfortunately, Dr. Chow passed away in 2007. Okay? Dr. Chow was very successful. Okay? And when he passed away, he left everything to his wife, Mrs. Chung, Madam Chung, I beg your pardon, including this bungalow that you see on screen. Okay, now this is the kind of property that impresses me. You see, you can drive the car around the compound. Okay, beat that. Okay, so you can see Dr. Chow was very successful, very wealthy. He left her a big house and a lot of money. Now, Madam Chung inherited all this property and money. So what do lonely, wealthy women do? Okay. They go on holidays, of course. Okay. So in 2008, Madam Chung and her friend went to Beijing for holiday, and they met this very handsome young tour guide. Okay. So this tour guide was very nice to her, and they even kept in touch after the trip. Okay. And he started to get very close to Madam Chung. He brought her around for medical appointments. He even lived in their home. He took care of her. He even cut her toenails for her. Okay? How many of you have cut your toenails for your parents? Okay? If you didn't, it's time to do it this weekend. Okay? You are now legally allowed to go to visit them, to go and cut the nails for them. Okay? So unfortunately, he had ill intentions. Madam Chung had cash of about $2.7 million. And then in the 4 years that she got to know this person, and by now you should have remembered his name, he's called Yang Yin. Okay? The 2.7 million became $10,000, okay? Even less than what I have in my bank account. Okay? So this is very unfortunate. So if you leave everything to your spouse, unfortunately with age, all of us will lose our mental capacity. Some of us will lose a little bit of it, some of us will lose a lot of it. Okay? In fact, my own father had dementia when I think about 10 years before he passed away. So there was no way he could have managed his own affairs. Okay, so this is a good example of number 2. Please beware of leaving everything to just one person, be it your spouse or children. Okay. Now, number 3, failed to protect against spouses or in-laws. Okay? Now, if you look at on the screen on the right side, there is a Straits Times article that says suspect in Boon Tat stabbing. Now, Boon Tat Street is a very busy street in the business district of Singapore. In case you didn't know, it's quite near to our office actually. And about 3 years ago, there was a very dramatic happening. In Singapore, it's quite peaceful. So when you have a stabbing in broad daylight, it is big news. So this elderly gentleman, okay, senior Mr. Tan, okay, the person who stabbed, okay, he owned a shipping firm. Okay. Okay. He actually stabbed his son-in-law to death. Okay. Now, but before that, we want to know what actually happened that led to him doing such a drastic thing. Okay. So the son-in-law married his daughter, obviously, and he joined Mr. Tan's shipping firm. Okay. Now, this the victim was credited with doing very well, and eventually he became the CEO and the director of the shipping firm. And Mr. Tan actually handed over the reins to him. Okay. And it was not reported in the news, but I suspect that perhaps Mr. Tan, to reward him, also gave him shares to the company. And eventually, the victim became the largest shareholder of this shipping firm that was originally owned by Mr. Tan. Okay. Unfortunately, things were not really rosy. They had marriage problems with Mr. Tan's daughter, and there was a very major business ownership dispute with Mr. Tan. It was reported that the victim sold his share, which is now the largest share of the shipping firm, to a rival firm. Okay? Now, those of you who are business owners, you will know that is a very big no-no. Okay, you don't sell your share to your biggest rival. Okay, so he actually did that, and of course, Mr. Tan went ballistic, right? Anyone would. Okay, so he snapped, and he couldn't take it anymore, and he actually stabbed the victim to death right outside Boon Tat Street in front of the large crowd. Okay, so this is something that is very real, and it could have been prevented had Mr. Tan taken steps to safeguard his business interests. Okay. So I'd like to show you again a better case study, just like we did for Lydia. Everybody knows this. They are open now. Okay, please don't chong down or rush down to the store. Okay, it's probably very crowded. Let's don't join the crowd. Okay. Everybody knows IKEA. IKEA was founded by this senior gentleman. You can see in the photo. His name is Igvar. Okay, I hope I pronounced that right. Igvar had 3 sons, and for most of us, we will think that, oh, okay, IKEA is probably owned by the 3 sons now. Okay, because the 3 sons are actually running IKEA. Okay, but no. Okay, what he did is that he's a billionaire, obviously. Okay, they will not go to his children. Okay, because IKEA is not owned by the three sons. IKEA is actually owned by a foundation, which is probably a trust as well. Okay, and the purpose of this foundation is to donate to charity and to support innovation, which is again what IKEA is about. This foundation was even started very early in the 1980s and is no longer under his family control, which means effectively, okay, his children are only part of the supervisory council. Okay, they are not allowed to own any shares in IKEA. They can work in IKEA. They are probably paid very well, perhaps millions of dollars as a senior management. They can get very wealthy through working for IKEA, but they can never work. They can never own shares of IKEA, right? So this is to ensure the long-term survival of the company. Because if you let your son or your daughter own the company, okay, you can't control what he or she does, like in the Mr. Tan example at Boon Tat Street. Because when your descendants own the share, they can do anything with it. Right? And if something happens, they may even end up being owned by your in-laws, okay, which is a big, very scary thought for most of us business owners. So this structure is a very complicated structure. It's not the purpose of our discussion today. It makes it impossible for any one person, even his own children, his grandchildren, to take control of IKEA. Okay? Now, of course, we don't have to go to that extent like IKEA. Of course, some of you may have a huge conglomerate. That's great. But even whatever your business is, you can take steps to protect your business interests so that your descendants can benefit from it, but not ruin it. Right? Let's go to number 4. Okay. Okay. Number 4, for those of you who are in business, you will understand this. If you are not in business, just bear with me for a moment. You may also know that if you have a trust, you are the items, the assets that are in the trust are actually protected against creditors. Okay, subject to some eligibility, of course. Okay. Now, if you do business, let's imagine this couple is running a company. You are always exposed to risks. Okay, you may have bank loans in your personal names. I know some business owners who do that to finance their business operations. Personal guarantees are very common for business owners. There might be claims, there might be other liabilities, and so on. Okay, so unfortunately, we have also read of people who have gone bankrupt while doing business because the personal assets, they signed away, they waive the immunity of personal assets. Okay, so if you do a trust to protect your family's assets, your personal assets, you are essentially ring fencing them like this. Okay, so your creditors can take the clothes that you are wearing, can take whatever little money that you have in your bank account. Okay, but whatever is in the trust, they can't touch. Okay, again, this is subject to compliance with the law, subject to eligibility. Okay, which we'll be happy to explain to you individually if you have questions on that. Okay, so that's number 4, failure to protect against creditors. Now the final one, number 5, failing to protect against family disputes. Now you might want to take note that the contents of your will, if you write a will, it is public. Okay, people can read your will, and some of you may have seen Michael Jackson. Okay, his will is all over the internet. Okay, imagine your will all over the internet. Okay, probably not, because we are not as famous as him. But yes, his will was actually splashed all over the internet because of dispute. Okay, unfortunately, closer to home, some of you may recognize this very nice home. It's quite near to Orchard Road. Okay, yes, it's the home of our founding father, Mr. Lee, whom I respect very much. In his will, there was some problems with the will that he did, and he's now able to, you can actually read his will if you want to, and I'm sure the great Mr. Lee does not want that to happen. Okay, in contrast, if you do a trust, the contents of the trust, the distribution can be kept secret. Okay, no one needs to know. Even beneficiaries do not know what the other people are getting. Okay, they only know what they are getting. And I think this is very key to preventing family disputes. Okay, and a lot of times when we do our wills for our clients, again, this is relating to Kennel's experience. We have a couple, husband and wife, coming to see us, and then they talk about what they want to do for their will. Okay, and then we give them our advice, and then after that they go back. Okay? Now the next day, one of them, usually, let's pretend it's the gentleman. All right, the man will come back again, and then he'll come and tell us, actually, what we say yesterday, please forget about it, because actually I have to take care of another family, okay, somewhere else. Okay, so if you do that in your will, then it will be open for all to see. Okay, whereas in the trust, you can actually do that, and it can be kept secret. Now, I am not advocating such behavior in any way, but just relating real life stories to you. Okay, and hopefully none of you in the audience today have such a situation. Okay, now I would like to use an example of this Mr. and Mrs. B to show the problems of equal distribution. Now, all of us, if you have children, I haven't met a parent who say, I don't love my children equally. Now, all of us love our children equally, and we want the best for all of them. Okay? So let's take this very typical example of Mr. and Mrs. B. right? They have a home, very nice home that's worth $4 million. They also have investments and cash worth about $2 million. Okay, these are what they have. Okay, and because they love their 3 children equally, child 1, child 2, and child 3, when they go to their lawyer, okay, to do up their will, and they tell the lawyer, we want to, in the event of our death, we want to give everything equally to all our children. So the lawyer says, okay, I'll just do it for you. Okay? So now, let's look at the children. Okay? Child 1 has married and moved out and have their family of their own, have a home of their own. Child 2 has just gotten married. He's still staying with his parents, Mr. and Mrs. B, and he's not quite decided what he wants to do. Okay? Does he want to stay or does he want to buy his own home? Okay? Child number 3 has just graduated and started working. She is still single and she definitely is staying with the parents. Now, let's look at this. Now, for the investments and cash, okay, there is no problem to distribute. Right? Usually, if you have like stocks or cash, this is quite easy to distribute. Okay? Unless if you tell me that they are artwork, then I think it'll be a big challenge to cut the piece of art into 3. But not many of us have that kind of investment, so this is not a problem. Now, the problem here is the home. Okay? Let's see what happens. Okay, let's focus on the home. Now, if you look at child number 1, okay, child number 1 has married and moved out. They have their home of their own, they have a family of their own. Do you think child number 1 wants to keep their parents' home or wants to sell? Yep, I can't hear you, but I think you can think in your mind that child number 1 wants to cash out. 1/3 share of 1.4 million is 1.33 million. That's very nice. You can buy another condo in Singapore easily. Okay? So that's child number 1. Now I'm going to skip child number 2 first. Let's go to child number 3. Right? Remember, child 3 is single and she has just started working. Okay? She has, let's pretend that she has no intention to get married yet. So she definitely wants to continue staying in the family home because this is the home that she has all her memories of her parents and it's a home that she grew up with. So definitely she wants to stay. So you can see child number 1 wants to cash out, child number 3 wants to stay in the home. The one that causes the most problems is actually child number 2. Okay, let's look at child number 2 now. Child number 2 is undecided. Okay, child number 2 can either cash out or he can continue to stay, right? But either way presents his problems because if he wants to cash out, his younger sister doesn't want to. Okay, so he has to convince the younger sister to sell her share as well. Okay? If he wants to continue staying, then the younger sister will be a light bulb, right? Okay, to his family. Okay? I'm not sure if you want to have your siblings staying with you as much as you love them. So it's kind of weird. Okay? Let's say child number 2 decides that, okay, never mind, I'll just go and buy a HDB flat. Okay? Now guess what? You can't unless you sell your share because even 1/3 share in a private property is still a share in a private property. And current HDB rules stipulate that if you want to buy a HDB flat, you have to sell your private property. So he can't. So he says, never mind, I got money. Let me go and buy a condo. Well, he can buy a condo. There's this 4-letter, well, it's not exactly a word, but it's 4 letters, ABST. He will be slapped with a hefty tax, okay? The additional buyer's stamp duty on top of all the other stuff. Okay? So this is a problem, okay, that is caused by a very simple thought of, I love all my children equally. I want to give everything to them equally. Okay? So in this example, we want to know that equal is not always fair, nor is it always appropriate. Okay? You can see in this case, it can actually cause a lot of problems. The 3 children may start fighting and quarreling. And sometimes when I drive around Singapore, and I'm sure you have seen that, sometimes you see a nice condo, nice building, and suddenly you see a plot of land which is overgrown with grass, and the house is falling into pieces, and you wonder how come nothing is being done about it. This could be an example of why, because the family can't decide what to do. And you have also seen in the paper some cases where their siblings sue each other over the home. Okay? And in the end, the lawyers win. Okay? So this is a big problem. Okay, so now that we know the 5 common reasons of why wealth doesn't go beyond 3 generations, you must look at your own situation and think that we all want to give our family the best. Okay, but if we don't plan properly, we might leave behind a mess instead. Okay. Right, so let's move on. But before we go to the second part, which is the 3 pillars of a everlasting legacy, I would like to call Kenneth. Let's do the second poll. Okay, this second poll will be, it's titled, "Do you remember your grandparents' names?" Okay, I must admit, I don't really remember. So do you remember? Of course, we know our parents' names, I hope. Okay, but do you remember at least one of your grandparents' names? Or do you remember more than that? Okay, so let's do the poll. Kenneth.
Okay, again, I'm launching the poll. So again, don't worry, your answers are anonymous.
We won't report to your ancestors, don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, almost. Okay. 30 seconds more. Wow, somebody knows the name of their great-grandparents.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll close it in about 10 more seconds. Wow, another person also know their great-grandparents.
We
You
have
can
some
join, yeah.
people coming from maybe very wealthy families.
Can join my club. I also know them. Okay, so we'll end the poll now. And let me share the results. As you can see, a majority of you, of course, you know your parents' name, and you know at least one grandparent
Very impressive.
name. Yeah, so most of you, very few of you would actually know your great-grandparents' name, and nobody here knows their great-great-grandparents' name. Okay,
Thank you,
back to
Kenneth.
you, Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, okay. Now the reason for me to do this poll, okay, let me just get my slides back, okay. Now we all want to be remembered in one way or another. Okay, for those of you who have children and grandchildren, obviously you hope they will remember the akong or ama that they had. Okay, now I must admit that I don't know my grandparents' names. Okay, it is not something that I'm proud of. Okay, I used to tell people my grandfather now lives in Mandai, but I don't know his name. Okay, but I'm talking about my paternal grandfather in this case. Okay, he was actually a very wealthy trader that came from China to Singapore. Okay, now when he came to Singapore, he already had 2 wives in China. Okay, so in those days, people can have multiple wives. Okay, at least the wealthy people. Okay, so when he came to Singapore, he saw the local Malay women. They were very slim and very pretty, and he fell in love with one of them, and he married them. Okay, so this became my grandmother. Okay, so I'm actually Peranakan. Okay, a mixture of. So he married my grandmother. So my grandmother was his 3rd wife, and her dowry was a box of diamonds. Okay, not 4点金, not just the earrings and the necklace and so on. Okay, she had a box of diamonds as a wedding dowry. Then you ask Daniel, so what happened? How come nothing? You putting got to do webinar on a Saturday afternoon, you know? So unfortunately, my grandfather passed away when my father was only 5 years old. That's what I heard. And because in those days, unfortunately, women are not educated. So my grandmother had to sell away whatever she got from my grandfather to feed the 5 children, including my father, obviously. So all the wealth was used up and no more money left for Daniel. Okay, so jokes aside, we want our children to remember us. Okay, we want our grandchildren and maybe more to remember us in our own way. Okay, but how do you do that? Okay, and one of the best ways, of course, not just to give them money, but give them something to remember you by. Okay. Now, for myself, as I've mentioned earlier, I have no children. Okay, so I don't have any descendants to take care of. So I do it in my small way by contributing to my secondary school and Singapore Polytechnic. Okay, so I give away bursaries every year to the needy students of my school, and my school has embarrassingly but very kindly immortalized me on the school wall. Okay? So it's something that makes me very humble and very proud. Okay? And I'm sure for those of you who have, again, those of you who have children and grandchildren eventually, you want to be remembered by them. Okay, and one of the ways is to create your own legacy, okay, using a trust. Okay, because as I mentioned earlier to you, how a trust works, okay, in a very basic form, okay, and a trust under Singapore law can last 100 years. Okay, so let me go on to share how do you make your trust or your legacy last as long as possible. Okay? Now I call them the 3 pillars. They are person, leverage, and administration. Okay, and this is not by chance. You can see that I've purposely designed it such that it spells PLA, which is our company initials. Okay, so let's start with P, person. Okay, the right person for a job. Now, if you are going to do a trust, you want your legacy to last as long as possible. There are 2 things that you have to be careful. Number 1, Kenneth, I can hear you. Kenneth, please mute yourself. Thank you. Yeah. So number 1, you want to use a professional trust company, because a company has infinite life, whereas an individual has a limited lifespan. Again, some of my clients tell me, it's okay that my brother or sister or my nephew or niece can administer my trust for me. Okay? There are 2 problems with that. Number 1, obviously, we love your brother and sister very much, but this person will not live forever. Okay? So, and what if this person prematurely deceases? Then your trust is going to be in peril. Okay? The other second problem will be people change. Right? Like it or not, today everything is fine, but people change. And when you appoint an individual as your trustee, this person has a lot of control over your assets. And again, we have seen in the news that sometimes this is not the best thing to do, because people change, they can mismanage the assets that are under their care. Okay. Second thing, people say, yeah, Daniel, I just go to my lawyer and do my will. Okay. Again, I want to say this because there might be lawyers in the audience as well. I have a lot of respect to lawyers. My own nephew is a lawyer. My cousin is a lawyer. Okay, we need them. They perform a very important service. But many lawyers are specialized in their areas of professionalism. For example, they are experts in conveyancing, in litigation, in corporate, and so on. Very few lawyers are specialized in estate planning. Okay, so I like to emphasize that if you like to do your legacy, you like to do your trust properly, we suggest that you do it with the right person. Okay, likewise, as you can see on the screen, if you have a Windows laptop and it's giving you problem, please don't send to Apple Shop. Okay, it's not going to help your Windows problem. Okay. Number 2, second pillar is leverage. Because we are in the financial services industry, we know how insurance works, and insurance is a fantastic tool when it comes to planning your trust. Okay, let me give you a very simple example here. Now, supposing this person wants to start a family trust and wants to put $5 million in. Okay, you don't have to physically put in the full $5 million. Okay, let me show you how this can be done. Now, you can put in 2 million of your assets. Okay, it can be your property, it can be your stocks or whatever it is, right? Doesn't matter. Okay. Now, the remaining 3 million, please, you don't have to use your own money. Okay, use an insurance policy, because your trust doesn't have to operate until you are gone. And all of us, like it or not, are going to die. Okay, just sooner or later. And one of my clients very famously told me, please don't die for free. Okay? So you can use a insurance policy. In this case, I've used the universal life policy. Of course, you can use others as well. Okay? So taking the example of a universal life policy, instead of putting in $3 million worth of assets to make up 5 million, you can actually just put in $1 million to buy this $3 million sum assured policy. Okay, imagine that using 1 million to buy 3 million. Okay, so in total, this person to set up a 5 million family trust has only put in 3 million. And actually, it can be less than this, because if you buy a universal life plan, some insurance companies are able to do premium financing on this 1 million, which means they are willing to lend you money to pay for this 1 million. Okay, of course, this is subject to eligibility rules. Okay, it varies from insurer to insurer. It varies from bank to bank that is lending you the money. But the concept is there. You understand now that if you need to do, if you want to do this, please make use of other people's money. Okay, don't use all your own money. Okay, so number 2, leverage. Number 3, okay, sorry, before we go to number 3, okay, let me show you an example of how insurance can be used in another way to keep the trust going as long as possible. Okay, so let's look on the left here. There is a elderly couple. Okay, they decided to set up this trust, and they use insurance, they use their money, and so on. Okay, and they set a trust. Now, let's pretend that this is the son. Okay, now in some of the trusts that I've come across, when a descendant uses money from the trust forces them to buy an insurance on their life. Okay, so the son is insured for $1 million, and when the son dies eventually, $1 million is repaid back to the trust. Okay. Likewise, let's pretend that this is the granddaughter of the elderly couple. She uses 2 million, okay, inflation, okay. She uses 2 million, and likewise, the trust makes her buy an insurance policy to repay 2 million when she dies, okay, and so on and so forth. You can see how you can create, using insurance, a legacy in perpetuity. It can actually go on for as long as possible. So with proper management, using the right tools, okay. Now the third one that I want to share, the last pillar to manage your trust properly, which we call it administration or command and control. Okay, another of my clients famously said, this one can control from the grave. Yes. Okay. You can do controlled giving in a trust. Okay. A regular allowance instead of a lump sum. We see that in Sentencia or Lydia's example earlier on, right? Instead of giving Joyce the full $11 million, she gets a small monthly allowance every month. Okay. Now, some of the trusts I know, they stipulate that to get money from the trust, to get an income from the trust, the beneficiary must be gainfully employed in a job. Okay. So again, this is to pass down your values, that they must be working. You don't want to ruin your descendants just because they have $10,000 coming from your trust fund, they don't feel like working. Okay. Again, sadly, I have come across a few people, thankfully not many, who never work a single day in their lives because they just take money from the trust fund. Okay. You can also do conditional giving. Okay. Upon reaching certain milestones, you can give a sum of money if your descendant gets married. You can give a sum of money if they have the birth of a child, or like we saw again in the Sentencia or Lydia Sam example, upon reaching a certain age that you think they have attained financial maturity, you give the inheritance to them. Okay. It can also be seed funding for business. Some of your descendants may be entrepreneurial, they have good business acumen. They can, instead of borrowing from the bank or borrowing from other investors, which they are subject to their to their rules, they can actually come to your trust to obtain seed funding for their startup. Okay. Some of the trusts, they are also functioning as a family bank, where, say, I'm a descendant of my great-great-grandfather. So today I'm going to buy my first property, for example. I'm going to buy my first home. Okay. Again, instead of borrowing from the bank, I can actually borrow from my great-grandfather's trust. Okay. And you can actually stipulate whether should the trust charge no interest or nominal interest. Okay, so this is all up to you. You can do the command and control today. Okay? And most importantly, when you do all this properly, you prevent misuse. Okay? Now, say some of your you can also stipulate in trust that if any of my descendants meet with an unfortunate accident, or it ends up in hospital, we can pay for the hospital bill. Or on a happier note, they got entry into Harvard or Oxford. The trust will pay the money directly to the company, okay, not to the descendants. Because if you pay a huge sum of money to the descendants, there is a possibility of misuse. Okay? So you can do that. Okay. Now back to the seed funding. If you take a stake in your descendants, if the trust takes a stake in the descendants company, there must be equity in return, so that you retain again control of that company and how it's being run. Okay, so it's really control from the grave, and like what my clients say. So all these, it's almost impossible to do in a will, but you can do it in a trust. Okay. So before I end, I finish the main session. Okay, we have some people in the audience who are fellow financial advisors like ourselves. Okay, if you are a fellow financial advisor and you found that this talk is useful to you, we can do a collaboration. We can speak to your clients, okay, and we will respect the arrangement that we have with you. Okay. Similarly, for some of the people in the audience, if you are in charge of speaking, in charge of a company or an event or a club that caters to affluent and high net worth individuals, let us know. We are happy to collaborate. Okay, I assure you that I am more fun in person, okay, when we can do all this face to face. Okay, now, okay, I have completed my presentation. Okay, we are now at the Q&A session. So Kenneth, could you come back on?